Yeah, so I've been in the sector pretty much actually all of my sort of working career. I've been in this third sector. I started out at a small charity called the Entertainment Artists Benevolent Fund, which is a charity in Twickenham looking after ex-entertainers and sort of theatrical types. It was in compliance and risk. Stayed there for a few years. Then I moved on to Age UK, so sort of big national charity. Again, I've always worked within sort of compliance and risk sort of functions. I was at Age UK for another couple of years, moved on to Asthma UK, which then became Asthma UK and British Lung Foundation. Again, a few years. So I tended to be sort of 2 to 4 years, I think, in each sort of place. And finally, in October, I started a Girl Guide again, so risk. I'm now head of risk in girl guiding. So I've had a range of experience in terms of size, income, and also it's really interesting with girl guiding the delivery mechanism for the charity, whereas in other organizations, the kind of the volunteer network hasn't been as big. Obviously, charities are reliant on volunteers, but within Girl Guiding, the service is provided by volunteers. So there's about 80,000 volunteers who deliver the service, which is sort of developed and scoped by the sort of national charity. But we rely heavily, well, we're completely reliant on volunteers who give up an incredible amount of their time. It's sort of, I think almost minimum, you're sort of giving up sort of 5 to 7 hours a week in terms of, doing the activities and all the risk assessments and everything like that. But you also get, senior volunteers, chief commissioners, and other kind of senior people within the charity who are not paid. Obviously there's volunteer role, who almost they work a full week, plus they almost do the kind of equivalent and a number of hours on a volunteer basis. So it's actually it's quite incredible, the dedication that people have to member charities like sort of Girl Guiding. I suppose it's similar in Scouts and other kind of organizations like that. But so different experiences, different delivery mechanisms, and each one has some unique sort of ways of working in oddities. But I actually really like the third sector. I've always found that's the kind of area I wanted to kind of work in. I didn't, for some reason, I always found the idea of sort of corporate organizations, or I always thought it would be really cutthroat and really sort of kind of in it for yourself. And I kind of quite liked the sort of idea of supporting beneficiaries, working for a kind of a greater good, and I also kind of felt that people working with a charity were nicer. So so it's a bit weird. So I actually wanted to become a nutritionist or a dietitian when I was at university. So that's what I studied at university, and I was planning to do it. And then in my third year, I just kind of had enough, and I kind of I sort of thought I don't really want to go into sort of dietetics. So I then decided, because I left university in 2009, so that was right at the peak of the financial crisis. So I thought getting a job was going to be really hard. So I thought actually I'm actually going to look into do a master's. So there was a sort of an MSc. It was called Health and Community, which was slightly weird title, I suppose, but it was quite broad in its approach, so you could kind of focus on the areas that you're interested in. And I thought I was possibly going to go into sort of gerontology, because I was interested in sort of older population, and I was in during my undergraduate, I'd kind of was always interested in older people's nutrition. So I kind of thought I was thinking about sort of possibly looking at even a PhD at some point. But I started doing the masters, and during the masters, as part of my research study, so I did a research study in it was the impacts or the effects of moving into a care home on sort of the loss of roles and the loss of kind of I suppose people, that kind of people who maybe not felt that they were ready to move into a care home, and that kind of how that impacted on them. So while I was doing, I found a sort of care home that let me sort of speak to the residents. And while I was there, I was asked if I could stay on, and that was the first job. So at the Entertainment Artists Benevolent Fund, they, the CQC, the Care Quality Commission, had just come into effect. They had there's a sort of new framework for assessment, and so the matron at the home asked me if I could sort of on a part-time basis work with her to make sure that we were sort of fully compliant in the sort of various regulations. And then it was almost from there, I just ended up kind of staying in kind of compliance, and then I kind of got more sort of health and safety and risk assessments, and then I took on the property, and I sort of, actually it became then a proper job. So I sort of stayed there throughout the sort of masters as a part-time basis, and then after I'd left, I was then they then sort of made that into a sort of full-time role for me. So that's kind of how I got into it. And I think once I'd moved on to, so I stayed, it's kind of compliancy, sort of health and safety, property type stuff. And then when I went to Age UK, that's when I became more interested in the risk side of things. So it was a slightly weird, when I tell people that I was, did nutrition at university. And before I went to university, I also studied to be a chef as well, which again is people like, just it's not a typical path. People always kind of assume you come from a finance background or you studied risk or you did business or whatever, but I didn't. So